Thank you for checking out Real Talk Personal Finance. Shit's about to get real. Cashflow King with you today, and today we're going to have a quick one. We're going to talk about some money myths. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. As always, we really appreciate it. Want to give a very special shout out once again to Cashflow Rockefeller Prince for the last episode on overemployed. We are still gathering some feedback from that episode, so keep it coming, and we will do an update at some point in the future. You can email the show, realtalkpersonalfinance@gmail.com, or click the link in the show notes to text the show and provide feedback that way. If you haven't listened to it, please go back and listen to that episode. It's a really good one. We're going to do something a little bit different today for a couple of reasons. Number one, the past two normal non-premium episodes have been over an hour and 15 minutes each, which is on the one hand great, but on the other hand, I realize that might be a little bit burdensome for some of you. And so we're going to make this week's episode pretty fast, pretty simple, and give you guys some time to get caught up. All right, with that said, today we're going to jump right in and get into some money myths. You may have heard some of these before. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. This is going to be a really quick, light episode. So number one, money myth number one, credit cards are bad for your finances. Have you ever heard that? Yeah, me too. And I could not disagree more. I know our friend Dave Ramsey would definitely disagree with us on that one. But credit cards can be good if you use them the right way. I always used to say it's kind of like a hammer, kind of like a tool, right? You can use it to, put some nails in and build a house. You can also use it to look at your neighbor and knock their teeth out, and we don't want to do that. So as long as you're careful and use them appropriately, they can be a really, really good tool to help you build positive credit history. A lot of them offer rewards, different consumer protections. If you haven't checked out, I believe it was all the way back in episode number 8 on credit card rewards featuring the Travel Queen. That was a really good episode if you're brand new to it. Anyone that's premium, we do send out some different things from time to time on Cashflow King's favorites. We've had a couple cards out there. I actually just applied for two last night, one business, one personal, and then also probably a couple months ago, I had another one that I'm finishing up a bonus on. So they can be really, really good for you if you use them the right way, as long as you're not carrying balances. If something goes wrong and somebody steals your information and goes to purchase something and they stole a credit card, I think the max liability I want to say is $50, and most companies you're not even on the hook for that if it's unauthorized use. And you're basically, you're going to be, it's not your money in the first place. You're essentially tying up the bank's money. But if you're using a debit card that's tied directly to your checking account, then it actually is your funds that are being used, and sometimes it could be a longer process for you to get those back. Money myth number 2, somewhat related to that one. Carrying a credit card balance improves your credit score. Have you ever heard that? Carrying credit card debt, carrying a balance improves your credit score. Another one, bullshit. And in fact, I used to speak to different classes just as a volunteer thing. And I remember one time, this was a college class that I was speaking to, there was a girl in the room who specifically said that, I think it was her grandparents, I think she said, that told her, she's like, oh, I didn't know that. I thought I had to, they told me to charge up, a couple packs of gum or whatever, but I thought I had to carry a balance and just pay the minimum to try to build credit history. That is a myth. That is not true. Hopefully you're not carrying a balance. Fun fact, according to ChatGPT, as of 2024, the average credit card debt balance in the United States is estimated to be around $5,525, which represents a 6% decrease from the previous year. The national average credit card debt reported in late 2023 was slightly higher at about $6,864. Another thing that was kind of interesting, skimming down here, said that Generation X tends to have the highest average credit card balance at $7,236, while Generation Z has the lowest at $2,312. And then finally, Americans with higher median annual incomes typically carry more credit card debt. So that's according to our ChatGPT here. I thought that was interesting, but at the same time, really not all that surprising because you have a lot of people that generally make higher incomes that like to play the keeping up with the Joneses game, and that can really bite you in the ass if you're not careful and can lead into some situations where you're in a cash flow crunch, and therefore even those people that are earning significantly higher incomes a lot of times can be carrying balances, believe it or not. Things are not always what they seem. Money myth number 3, you should avoid all debt. I don't necessarily think that's true. Once again, folks over at Dave Ramsey would probably disagree with us, but there are certain types of predatory debt like payday loans and title loans. I was driving through one time. I forget what the state was I was driving through, but there were a whole bunch of places where you could basically go in with the title to your car as collateral and take out a loan against it. Probably not a good idea for most people or really anybody. Credit cards, we just talked about those. If you're carrying balances, that can be bad if you're carrying it from month to month, but if you're paying it off in full, you should be fine there. Some people, and this is debatable, but there are good types of debt like student loans. If you are presumably going to go into debt in order to get a higher paying job and therefore earn more income and be able to pay those loans back, and then some, you can make an argument that student loans are a quote unquote good type of debt, but again, that's debatable. Mortgages, a lot of people would say, is generally a good type of debt, especially if you're going to have a mortgage on a piece of real estate, and generally speaking, over time, long periods of time, real estate tends to appreciate and at least keep up with inflation. So oftentimes that's looked at as good debt. Money myth number 4, renting is throwing money away. We've talked about this a little bit on the show before, but I would say that, and I used to rent way back in the day, right? It provides flexibility and mobility. In fact, when I moved from, many of you know from the Unveiled show, I moved from the Northeast to the Midwest. I would not have been able to do that if I had an owned property. I mean, I could have in the Northeast and had to move to the Midwest or decided to move to the Midwest, but it would have taken longer. I would have had some additional costs, some carry costs and selling costs and things like that. Maybe I couldn't have moved as quickly, but I was fairly nimble in order to be able to go ahead and make that move because I was a renter at the time. I also didn't have to worry about things that I don't like doing, like yard work or maintenance or anything like that. So you have less time on upkeep if you're renting. And then there's some folks, especially even in the personal finance space, there's a gentleman named Ramit Sethi, who many of you may have heard of. I have mixed opinions about him, but I will say his podcast, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, is very entertaining. He has books, and he's pretty famous, but he loves to shit on real estate, and he rents himself, and he's a multimillionaire, and he likes to, always talk crap about real estate, and it's not all it's cracked up to be, and, this, that, and the other thing. But even somebody like him would tell you that there is value in renting. Depending on the state that you live in, the cost to own a home versus the cost to rent, you can do all those calculations and figure out for yourself and your personal situation, in terms of how long you may want to stay somewhere or not, and how flexible and portable you want to be able to be or not, whether or not that's going to make the most sense for you. So renting is throwing money away. I would say that that's also a money myth. Number 5, you need a lot of money to start investing. And that's not true either. There's a lot of companies out there that have low or no minimums to get started. I have one of my nieces who we just got started. She is working part-time now while in school. I believe she's 16, and so we were able to help her get started with the Roth IRA for herself because she now has earned income. And so that's kind of nice, and she didn't have a ton of money to start with. She probably has more money than a lot of adults do, but that's kind of besides the point. You don't have to be, a millionaire to start investing. In fact, most people that build wealth over time, as many know, everybody starts at zero, right? So you can dollar cost average, you can put little bits of money consistently into a certain type of an account, like a retirement plan or even a non-retirement plan over time. A lot of platforms now will allow for fractional share ownership. So even if depending on what you're investing in, if you don't quite have enough dollars to buy complete shares and you have to buy fractional shares, that's also a possibility. You have things like DRIPs, dividend reinvestment programs that are out there that can help you continue to reinvest and build your portfolio over time. You don't really need to have a ton of money to get started. The most important thing for anybody is just to actually go ahead and get started. Money myth number 6, you should pay off your mortgage as soon as possible. We've talked about this before. You can go back and listen to the Power of Your Mortgage show if you want my thoughts on it, but there's a psychological and a mathematical approach to that, right? So we're all emotional to some degree, and basically if you put everything in a blender, that's going to be the right answer for you. But I don't necessarily think that everybody should pay off a mortgage as soon as possible. There's other ways to go about it, and for you might choose to do that, and that's totally fine. But some people look at this as a rule, like I have to pay off my home as soon as I possibly can. I must do this, and that's not going to be true for everybody. Number 7, you can rely on Social Security for retirement. Well, the average Social Security benefit, according to ChatGPT, in 2024, do you know how much it is? $1,907 a month. Could you live on that? I don't know. Maybe you could, maybe you couldn't. But that's something to consider. Social Security was never designed to replace 100% of somebody's income in retirement, but unfortunately for a lot of people, that is the case, or it replaces a very large percentage of their income in retirement. So we can't strictly rely just on that. At least most of us cannot strictly rely and shouldn't rely just on that. And we can do a whole show about that. In fact, I think we did way back in the archives. We did some Social Security basics. So if you're interested in that, feel free to go back and check it out. Number 8, you need a high income to build wealth. Well, as we saw on the credit card statistics, that is not necessarily true. It's really not about what we all make, but what we keep, as has been said out there before. And so just because you have a high income, if your expenses are correspondingly just as high, then you're really not getting ahead. I don't think that's news to anybody. And then finally, number 9, your credit score is only important when buying a house or a car. Money myth number 9, credit score is only important when buying a house or a car. Also not true. Your credit score can come into play for something as simple as wanting to rent an apartment, for getting better rates on your insurance, like auto insurance, for example, or even getting a job. I don't remember what the exact time frame is because I've never been bankrupt and I don't ever plan on it. But there, even in our industry and financial services, if you've had a bankruptcy within the past so many years, I believe that is pretty much a big no-no and a big red flag. And most companies will not hire you to work in financial services as a financial advisor if you've had a recent bankruptcy within the past however many years, because if you can't demonstrate financial responsibility for yourself, then who are you to work in an industry where you're going to be exposed to sensitive information regarding other people and their money? So those are 9 money myths. I told you guys I'd keep it short and sweet today, so that's exactly what we're going to do. Thank you for checking out the Real Talk Personal Finance podcast. We will see you in the next episode.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.